much of the day on Thursday too. There is a Met Office weather warning in place.
I'm back with the latest from BBC London in an hour. Now though, it's back to Dan and Louise. Bye-bye for now.
Hello, good morning. You're watching Breakfast with Louise Minchin and Dan Walker this morning.
Let's return to our main story and that warning from the Prime Minister that we are going to have to learn to live with coronavirus.
Yes, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson made that comment after announcing the restrictions in England will be extended by 4 weeks, but no further. Well, let's discuss all that this morning and a lot more with the Cabinet Minister Michael Gove, who joins us live on BBC Breakfast. Thank you for being with us this morning. Can we start with that, I suppose you could call it a mantra from yesterday, learning to live with the virus. What does that look like to you this morning, Mr Gove?
It's a recognition that the most important thing that we need to do is to make sure that our really successful vaccination programme continues, that everyone, every adult gets 2 doses of the vaccine. That provides the best protection possible against a virus that's going to be with us for the foreseeable future. That virus will, of course, circulate, and it's likely that come winter we may see an increase in its level of circulation. It's also the case that that virus is still circulating significantly in other parts of the world, and the best protection that we can give to people against that virus is the jab.
Yeah, and we'll come to that vaccination programme in a moment.
I can't predict with confidence what the likely level of the circulation of the virus will be and what the public health impact will be. But what I do know is that the best way of minimising the number of people who go into hospital and who face terrible consequences as a result, the best way of reducing that number is by increasing vaccination. So I don't think we're at all blasé or shoulder-shrugging about anyone dying. But the best way that we can ensure that we protect everyone, including the vulnerable, is by all of us getting the jab.
Yeah, but I'm sure they are conversations you must be having in government about...
Every year we lose friends and relatives. What we must do is everything we can in order to minimise pain, suffering, and mortality. We can't eliminate it, but what we can do is we can use science and we can support our gifted professionals on the front line of the NHS to help as many people as possible. And that's why, as a country, we've invested in the vaccine programme, why we support our NHS.
And that latest delay that the Prime Minister was talking about yesterday is, as you say, to allow 70% of the population to get fully vaccinated. Whereas before it was about data, not dates, the 19th of July was put forward as a date that things will change on. Do you have that and share that confidence this morning?
Yes, I do.
And why do you, is that because of the vaccination programme? And because I'm really interested in this, because there'll be millions of people in your mind is the day that things will stop for good.
Well, it's certainly the date when we'll move to stage 4, yeah. And again, when we reached yesterday, we made it clear that we would make a judgment about how appropriate it was to lift some restrictions. We were clear in the roadmap that we wouldn't move to stage 4 any earlier than the 21st of June, and regrettably we've had to delay that move, as you know. But it's also the case that the evidence which came out yesterday shows that the vaccine is highly effective, especially if people get 2 doses against the Delta variant. So one can never predict the future with perfect confidence. But insofar as we can be confident about anything in this complex world, we can be confident that the increased level of vaccination that we will have by the 19th of July should allow us to further relax restrictions.
One of the things that Jonathan Ashworth was saying, and this is...
Well, Jonathan's a politician with the gift of the gab, but the reality is that we put India on the red list before the Delta variant was a variant under investigation, and well before it was a variant of concern. Now, of course, we can only act on the basis of the information we have at the time.
I appreciate that.
We put India on the red list at that point.
OK, I appreciate that. But you did take action over Bangladesh and Pakistan before, again, as you said, this was a variant of concern. You put those countries on the red list on the 9th of April, and yet those cases were similar to what was going on in India. In fact, India had a higher case point at that time, and yet India didn't go on the red list until April the 23rd. So why did you make that judgment about Bangladesh and Pakistan, but not India?
Because a higher proportion of people coming from Bangladesh and Pakistan, a higher proportion, had a higher positivity rate.
Now, you say that. I thought you might say that. So I had a look at the figures, and actually that according to NHS Test and Trace, they don't support that claim, because they when they look at it, they say from the period of the 25th of April to the 25th of March, to the 7th of April, the positivity rate from Bangladesh was 3.7%, from India it was 5.1%, and from Pakistan it was 6.2%. So actually those positivity rates were all quite similar, and India was higher than Bangladesh.
But the advice that we had from the Joint Biosecurity Centre was that the danger from Pakistan and Bangladesh, the risk, I should say, was such that we should put those measures in place. And then subsequently we put measures in place for India. As I say, the measures that we put in place for India occurred before we knew that this variant was a variant under investigation.
But that delay was 2 weeks, Mr. Gove. And
it is the case, of course, but even with countries that have the tightest of travel restrictions, like Australia, for example, you can never be absolutely certain that you can eliminate the risk of a new variant arriving. But the decision to place India on the red list, of course, meant that the visitors from India had to go into hotel quarantine. But even before then, anyone coming from India had to immediately, on arrival in this country, quarantine at home for 10 days.
But 20,000 people still came into the country in those few weeks. Of course,
Nonsense.
Why?
Because the Prime Minister would never put the health of the country at risk in that way. People who are peddling this line are, trying to make a political point. I suppose that's, happens, doesn't it? And B, aren't looking at the facts and the timeline that we've been discussing. So, what can one say? People will throw all sorts of rubbish like that around. I think the thing is just to shrug one's shoulders and to look at the facts.
OK, one more question on this, because you say that the facts and the timeline we've been discussing, but
Of course, it's possible to look back and to reflect on the decisions that were taken at the time, and to hope that we had more information, which would have given us a greater degree of insight and knowledge and confidence. But as I say, at the time that India was placed on the red list, that was before the Delta variant was a variant under investigation, let alone a variant of concern. OK, I
don't want to go over the same ground again. You've tried to answer those questions, and our audience will be able to make their minds up about that. There's a few other things I wanted to ask you about.
Well, it is the case that there is discretionary support that is given to local authorities and to others. Some of that money has been drawn down. Some of it remains available for businesses. There is a suite, a package of financial support. I don't deny for a moment that the hospitality sector, faces particular challenges, but we've got to balance the risk in certain circumstances with the wider impact on public health.
Will there be any change to the potential level of support for those, given that extra 4 weeks of restriction?
No, the Chancellor made a decision, I think a wise one, earlier this year to run support long. That's why furlough extends into September. That's because the Chancellor anticipated that there may have had to have been, as there has been, a slippage in our ability to reach the 21st of June date.
OK, something else Jonathan Ashworth was talking about with Louise was the wearing of masks and the use of social distancing once we pass the date of the 19th of July. How are you looking at that? What is in your mind as to what the rest of the year might look like?
Well, I want as few restrictions as possible, but I'll be guided by clinical advice from doctors and scientists.
Do you think mask wearing will be used in this country over winter this year?
Well, again, I want as few restrictions as possible, but I'm not an epidemiologist or a virologist, and I will listen to those who are and weigh their advice in the balance.
Can I ask you about COVID passports as well? Because you were the minister who was responsible for looking at this. We haven't heard much about it. This was, of course, for use for travel and
download the NHS COVID app, because it not only provides you and others with proof of vaccination. It's also an incredibly useful way of interacting with the National Health Service. And of course, the Transport Secretary has been negotiating with other countries in order to ensure that we can use that technology in order to smooth international travel later this year.
So what about the COVID passport, though?
That's it. That's what I've been talking about.
OK, so the app is so when you were given the responsibility of looking into the COVID passport, that is it. The app is it.
Yeah, I mean, there are other ways, of course, of demonstrating COVID status, as we know. But the app provides us with a perfect opportunity to demonstrate that status. And it's an opportunity for people to, we hope, demonstrate that status as they travel abroad in the future.
OK, last thing to talk to you about is this trade deal with Australia. The president.
Well, the first thing is that Minette Batters, who runs the National Farmers Union, is a great champion for farmers across the country. The second thing is that farmers across the whole United Kingdom produce high-quality produce to the very highest standards, which is why I think reducing trade barriers will provide them with opportunities to sell more abroad. The third thing is that there has been some myth-making about some of the practices that Australian farmers use. And the fourth thing is that we're going to maintain our high standards when it comes to things like, hormone-injected beef and chlorinated chicken and so on. So, again, I want to work with Minette. She's a brilliant person to make sure that we can get the best possible deal for British farmers.
So you mentioned myth-making there. So do they not use hormone growth promoters and pesticides?
It is the case that there are some practices in Australia that we wouldn't allow here, but it's also the case that we have restrictions on some of the products that can be brought in because of our particular public health requirements. The other thing, though, is that the majority of Australian produce goes to Asia. That's their closest market. It's a growing market as the demand for protein, for beef and lamb, grows in Asia. The proportion of Australian meat that's likely to come to the UK is going to be a pretty small part of their overall production. So, it's also the case, as I understand it, that Liz Truss has, in the negotiations, secured a commitment from Australia to, work with us on high animal welfare standards, and I think that's a good thing.
Mr. Gove, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Not at all. No, thank you.
Thank you.
7:46. You are watching breakfast now. There was a long wait for a particular game of football, wasn't there, Kat?
It was, and this is becoming the kind of iconic image of Scotland's experience so far at the Euros. But what I love about it was that for millions of young Scots yesterday would have been a life-defining moment. Morning, everybody. After 23 years of waiting, all the expectation of their fans, it was a disappointing start for Scotland, losing 2-1 at Hampden Park in front of more than 12,000 fans yesterday, despite a bright...
To have been there. When you go away with the Tartan Army, you pandemic for breakfast and talk about the game, who's going to be in the side, the amazing walk to the ground.
Borrowed from behind out of my mind for quite some time. And in terms of what happens now, Colin, of course, there's a guarantee of 2 more games. But
Enjoy the rest of it. Now, you'll know Ewan Thomas best for his speed over a mere distance of 400 metres.
It must be so tough for them because obviously when it's your life, it's more than just your job. It's everything to you. You train for that one moment in the spotlight and it's only every 4 years or so. And I think when you've got that end goal, it's easier because training hurts. Yes, I might have an injury. Yes, I've got lots of personal problems I might be going through, but the Olympics is where it's at. But tough, but just keep pushing through. And to all those athletes who are training for this, just go out there and do Britain proud. And I hope you get your chance. If you don't, I'll be mortified for everybody because they've worked so hard. And it's not just those athletes, it's the support networks. It's the parents who've driven them to training for years and years. It's very hard.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for talking to us this morning and raising awareness as well. And I hope Teddy continues to recover as well. Thank you. Rest well.
Look after those feet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ewan. Stay with us. We've got the headlines coming up for you on Breakfast this morning.
The travel show is hitting the road.
Channel.